One of the things that I try to emphasize on this channel whenever we're talking about a particular story is for you guys to not just focus on what you're being presented, but also focus on why you're being presented a particular story, a particular narrative, a particular whatever. And also what comes with the question why is why not? Why do certain stories not reach the national threshold while other stories seem to be elevated to that point, as if it is more important for you to see that versus this. Now, even in a perfect balanced media world, the stories that are going to reach national attention are going to be selected by someone for some reason. And this is because we have a nation of 300 million plus people. And in that nation, tragic things happen across it each and every day. So what gets elevated, what gets brought to your attention beyond your local community is often going to be down to the choices of somebody behind the scenes. In fact, even the stories chosen for you by me on this channel, what I choose to highlight, what I choose to focus on, what I choose to direct your attention to is based on my own proclivities, things that I'm interested in, and the overall agenda that I personally have. The only difference is that I'm pretty upfront about what I want to talk about and the reason why. The reason I highlight specific local crime stories is because I believe they're indicative of a broader trend. Sometimes they're tied specifically to policy, and occasionally when I do a one-off that's just particularly entertaining to me, I'll give you that information up front so that you know what's going on behind the curtain, because I'm not trying to hide anything from you. However, the way the media works is they pretend that this is objectively the story that you need to focus on. This is reflective of America. This is elevated above all others. And when you notice what the media tends to highlight, what types of stories, what types of victims they tend to be interested in, you can't help but notice that there's a pattern, not just in what they're covering, but in what they're not covering. And a perfect example of this is this Johnathan Lewis Jr. story out of Las Vegas, a 17-year-old high school student who reportedly was trying to stop bullies, even though in other reports, and we're going to get into language a little bit later, it was actually stop a robbery, and he was beaten by 10 to 15 black teenagers, or mostly black teenagers, to the point where he died. And even though this happened a couple of weeks ago, there have yet to be any arrests in the story. And this is what we're going to talk about today. But before we do, I want to say thank you to everybody who signed up over on actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
And thank you to the podcast listeners, Spotify, Apple, and Google's podcasting platform.
Because Johnathan deserves justice. His father reports the gang attacked when he tried to protect a smaller kid that had been robbed and thrown in a trash can by the gang.
Somebody was laying on the ground, and they were like out of commission and incapacitated. And right in that parking lot, I saw somebody getting chest compressions, a CPR, the police came, ambulance, fire truck.
So there is a viral video to this story. I'm not going to be showing you the viral video to this story because I will get age restricted, and all these crazy things will happen from YouTube's end that will prevent you from seeing this. However, I have sources linked in the description of this. You can watch it for yourself, and you can see in broad daylight at a high school, 15 or so, mostly black students, are jumping a white student. Now, also in the video, and this is quite notable, there are other black kids that appear to be trying to break up the fight, trying to help Johnathan Lewis Jr., and this is of note. It is worthy of commentary, and we also don't know the race or ethnic background of the original kid that was being robbed and or bullied, depending on which reporting that you believe, that ultimately led to Johnathan Lewis Jr. interjecting himself in this situation. But needless to say, we have a 17-year-old beaten to death on camera by 17 attackers, and there's no arrests made, and this is quite suspicious. Also, we don't have almost any mainstream left-wing national media coverage. We have a lot of online media driving this story up, and it's perking up here and there in conservative media, but it appears this does not pique the interest of CNN, MSNBC, or the usual suspects. Also, there's some very interesting language in the headlines and in the local media coverage that I think is worthy of commentary, but first and foremost, we have to mention the fact that if this was a story, regardless of whether or not it's a hate crime, which I am not alleging in this particular case, of 15 white kids beating a black kid to death at his own high school, and you had the angle of maybe the black kid was trying to stop bullying, or maybe he was trying to stop another kid from being robbed, this of course would be national news. And the reason we know for a fact this would be national news is because a white person arguing with a black person is national news for months and months and months, even when it's proven beyond any shadow of a doubt, like the Amy Cooper Christian Cooper case, that the black person was objectively in the wrong. This is what people are really angry about, by the way.
This video is making the rounds online, showing what's believed to be the fight that happened Wednesday afternoon. Metro officers responding to reports of a student fight across the street from Rancho High School. The investigation revealing the victim got into a physical altercation with 15 people before cops arrived.
So obviously I'm blurring out this video because it's showing the beating to death of Johnathan Lewis, but again, it will be linked in full in the description, and it's from CBS 8, which I'm hoping and thinking is a local Vegas affiliate, but the thing is, I don't know that to be true because I couldn't find this on YouTube in order to confirm it, and other places in this country have CBS 8 as their local affiliate, but the point I want to make about this is about the language being utilized by this local news coverage, which is a pattern that I notice throughout the local news coverage, and considering we're relying on local reporting above all else in this story, I find it quite interesting. So they say that Lewis got into a physical altercation with 15 people, which again is not really reflective and is far more neutral in terms of language than I would use when talking about this story. When I see video of 15 kids stomping out somebody who's on the ground, attacking this person in a mob style, I'm not going to portray this as an equal participant in the fight, but that's how the local media is presenting it here, and this is not the first instance that I notice looking through the coverage of this story of vague or neutral language meant to deflect out of how horrific this actually is. Again, think about it like this. If this were a black kid, if he were beaten up by 15 white kids, whatever the initial dispute, it doesn't matter. Immediately it would be called racist. It would be national news. And anybody who said that it was a fight or a normal altercation or downplayed it in terms of language would be at risk of being fired from their job. Now, I've seen other people say, we don't know what happened before the video. And to be clear, that is true. Anytime you have small excerpts of video, we don't know what happened before it. However, nothing justifies 15 people stomping out to death a high school student across the street from their high school over whatever petty dispute. Even if he was in a one-on-one fight and they broke up the fight, they roughed him up a bit, that would be one thing, but it's the continuation of violence and the smiles and the celebration of the violence and the fact that this kid ended up dead that puts this far beyond justification in my mind.
Nothing that large, like 3 people maybe, but like 15, I've never heard of that before.
Rancho High Jr. Antonio Green says he's a classmate and saw the video.
It could happen to anybody. It could happen for me just for because I have a natural mean face. It could happen to me just from looking at somebody the wrong way.
Now again, it is incredibly important for you to understand and make this distinction. Even though the reason the media, in my opinion, is using neutral language, and the reason why this hasn't been taken up by CNN or MSNBC is because the perpetrators in this case are largely, if not 100%, black male perpetrators, I want to point out that there were black kids that were, according to the video, trying to get this kid out of danger, and you have a kid like this who clearly has nothing to do with the mob that attacked this young man and killed him, that are shocked and horrified by the violence right outside the high school. This is a classmate of the victim right here, and you could just see on his face he sees himself as aligned with the victim, as somebody who could be victimized like this.
It could happen to anybody. It could happen for me just for because I have a natural mean face. It could happen to me just from looking at somebody the wrong way.
Not aligned with the perpetrators. So for all those people who are immediately going to jump to the racial narrative because the left will jump to the racial narrative, I want you to take that with you. Again, this isn't being covered by the national media, because the perpetrators were black, but we have no evidence right now at this moment that the reason for the attack was a black-white issue. We still don't have the identity or any real information about the kid that was being attacked first, that Johnathan Lewis Jr. allegedly tried to help either stop him from being robbed and or being bullied. So that information needs to come out in the future as it comes to motivation. However, motivation would be a lot easier if there were actually arrests made, which we're going to get into a little bit later.
Neighbor Greg Bostic was shocked to see it.
From the video, that's a problem. You can't just retaliate with hate, and get back and revenge all the time. Sometimes you got to talk it out.
Now again, you have another neighbor, notably because this story is drawing a lot of racial attention, a black man who is very shocked by this. He witnesses, and by the way, very interesting, he attributes the motivation for the attack on this young man to hate, so that's how he saw that. Take that for what it's worth. Again, we're trying to glean a motive right now in this moment because we don't have one, because there's not that much information, because there's not that much interest beyond the local media and some online conservative media. So again, take that for what it's worth, but remember what I told you earlier about why we're discussing this in the first place.
I saw a couple seconds of this video on accident, and these kids are just like, it's just like lunacy. I can't even just imagine how it even comes to this.
Johnathan Lewis says his family is still in shock, trying to process 17-year-old Johnathan, an aspiring artist with a huge heart, is gone.
Johnathan was an incredibly loving and caring young man. I was just looking through my text messages with him the last couple of days before, and I'm just so grateful that I to tell him I love him.
So here we have the father, and he's absolutely in shock. He's talking about how much he cared for and loved his son. He shows some of his messages with his son, them exchanging I love yous and all that, and how sudden this is for him and his wife, for his life to be taken, again at school, where your child is presumably supposed to be safe. Now, we're going to have to get into the language of this Fox 5 segment, because the whole point of this is that the father is still demanding justice. The suspects are allegedly students at this school, and yet we still don't have arrests made in this particular case, which is really getting under my skin. But what's also getting under my skin is the way that this is worded from this local media person who had the grace to not show the video in her segment and had the grace to interview the father, but for some reason can't tell you what's actually being alleged without prettying it up in terms of language.
He says his son died a hero, standing up for a smaller student at Rancho High School in a fight over AirPods.
It's this kind of language that really gets under my skin about the local media, and why it's important to analyze the coverage beyond the racial component and the racial double standard being put forward by the left. Because embedded in the story, in between that hypocrisy of the national media, is the local coverage and how they try to obfuscate reality in their own coverage. The father did not say that they had a fight over AirPods. That doesn't make any sense. 15 kids fighting with a smaller child over AirPods. Obviously, what was being reported by the father, if you're going to quote him, at least quote him accurately, is that they were robbing another kid for his AirPods. It was a robbery. The kid was beaten up. He was apparently dumped in a garbage pail or in a dumpster, some kind of waste receptacle, and that's when Johnathan Lewis interjected himself in order to defend the kid, according to the father. Now, we don't have verification of this. I will wait for the facts of the case to come out. But for them to say it was a dispute over AirPods, like, oh no, if you actually turn up this feature, then the bass comes up more, versus an actual robbery, which was what was being alleged and what actually makes sense, that kind of thing really annoys me. And we wouldn't be seeing this language at all. We would be hearing about evil white racism had the races been reversed. And again, if you don't believe me,
because Johnathan deserves justice. His father reports the gang attacked when he tried to protect a smaller kid that had been robbed and thrown in a trash can by the gang.
Here's the father from the News Nation clip, or here's the reporting from the News Nation clip, so you can hear it for yourself.
Then a group of 15 students turned on him. Johnathan was left fighting for his life.
Jonathan's mother and I just sat there and held our son's hand for days and nights and just hoping and praying that, that he could recover.
But that is not what happened. Days after the brutal attack, Johnathan died at UMC. His father was by his side before he was taken off life support.
just like shaking for hours when I could barely even walk or could barely even get to my car.
Look, I have to be perfectly honest with you guys. I didn't watch this full local news segment in its entirety before I started shooting this video. I saw the way that they talked in the neutral language about the dispute over the AirPods. I was looking at the other headlines, the videos where they say, oh, Johnathan engaged in a fight or an altercation with these 15 people, and that really made me angry, as you heard earlier in the video. But this part really got to me because he's waiting in the hospital with his kid. His kid's on life support, holding his hand. He's praying for a miracle, hoping that his son will recover. And the whole time, he knows that his kid is there because he raised his kid right. His kid was defending another child, according to all of the reporting right now. And that's why he was savagely beaten. That's why he's in the hospital. That's why his life is cut short. A kid named for him did the right thing, proving that this father is a good man in that moment, and it cost him his life. It cost the father his son. It cost the mother his son. It's absolutely tragic. It's horrible.
Police told Lewis there may be a resolution soon, but he says it will take much more than arrests to heal his broken heart.
So justice is a deep, deep thing for me, and there's a lot more to it than just these kids going to prison. To me, is what is the community going to do about this? You know, when are people going to wake up and start having some compassion for one another and have some empathy and actually have a sense of community and actually work towards real solutions for these children that are just going absolutely mad.
This shouldn't be the cost of standing up for what's right. This shouldn't be the cost of defending somebody who's in need. But unfortunately, not only is it the cost, but there's no consequences as of right now. And hearing the father say, look, arrests aren't going to bring his son back. So even though that's good, he would want that. It's not justice to the extent that he believes in justice. Now, look, I don't want to overstep my bounds, overplay my hand, or anything of the sort. I want to make it clear that even though I am outraged that it's taking this long, and I don't believe there's a good justification for that, that is not an outrage that is shared by the father. While he is demanding justice, while he does want arrests, I actually saw a recent article headline that the father is saying that the police are working on this, and he's actually defending them in some regards based on the delay, likely because they informed him that they're building a case against the individuals. If that is the case, then fine, sure, whatever. But the thing is, again, this is another aspect of the story that would graduate it to national attention versus a local story. If there was any delay, any hesitation, if the races were reversed, obviously the national media would be putting an exorbitant amount of pressure on the police and labeling them to be racist and biased against the victim, and all of these bad negative things that we've seen put on police departments before for much shorter delays in arrests, for much less clear cases of criminality. Now, again, to my point about media coverage, media attention, neutral language in the headline, look at what was portrayed by USA Today when I pull up the article via Google. However, the article headline was changed shortly after this, I'm presuming due to backlash, but this is how they initially categorized it. Las Vegas teen Johnathan Lewis dies after brawl with over 12 others. So again, I criticize people in the Vegas story involving the hit and run for attacking the woman who wrote the article that was more to be an obituary for Andreas Probst, because I thought that was completely out of line in that particular case, especially since that particular woman actually is the one who produced the evidence weeks later that ended up leading to the arrest and the charging of those two individuals with the homicide, with the murder charges. But in this case, the labeling of it as a brawl involving 12 others makes you think, or gives you the impression that it was a neutral kind of situation. Also, I want to point out that there's almost no mention of race in this situation, even though, again, it would be at the forefront if this were a story of this young white guy arguing with these black people in a viral video, even if he was in the right in that situation. And remember, whenever we go into crime statistics, whenever we talk about interracial violence, the balance is overwhelmingly black on white versus the other way around. This is why the media has gone to the point where they're putting up arguments between black and white people, because they're so desperate for black victimization at the hands of white people. But again, the devil is always in the details, and considering that they have editors and all of these people associated with the craft of these type of articles, this choice of Brawl to write this as neutrally as possible was made intentionally by USA Today. Now, there's a GoFundMe for Johnathan Lewis Jr.'s family. I will link it in the description of this video for anybody out there who wants to contribute, who wants to help out. I always appreciate when people from the audience go above and beyond and do something positive. If you want to do something positive, I know you're not fans of the GoFundMe platform, this is a good way to do it. So I leave that option open to you. Now, look, I will update this story as there are relevant updates as we see arrests, but understand information is going to be limited, because if it is true that these are students at the very same school, chances are we're not going to get their names and all of that due to the fact that they're juveniles. However, I do find it incredibly interesting that the media seems to be tripping over themselves to neutralize what happened, to sanitize it, and that the usual suspects in the mainstream media have no interest in covering this story. Now, I will say the idea that the media entirely is ignoring it is a bit of an overstatement. I wouldn't have this information if not for the media, if not for somebody reporting it. But what we're talking about here is how we have a double standard in what is shown to you, and the reason why appears to be that the media is not interested in white victims and black perpetrators. They're only interested in forwarding this idea that black people are the perpetual victims. Now, again, credit to the young men who actually try to intercede on Johnathan Lewis Jr.'s behalf. Unfortunately, their efforts were for naught. And to Johnathan Lewis's father and his family, I wish you the best. I hope you get justice. I hope you get some measure of that, even though I understand nothing will bring back your son. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like the video, show them by leaving a like. Subscribe for more content. Follow me on all my social medias. Support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the Johnathan Lewis Jr. case. Till next time.